Welcome back to the Jasmine Star Show, where we talk about business, life, mindset, and reassessing through halfway points to achieve your goals. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, watching and listening on YouTube, you're going to notice I'm in a slightly different area. I am starting to record podcasts entirely on my own in my office. And so the videos are going to look not as high budget. We're doing it, I wouldn't say ghetto fab. I'd just kind of say ghetto-ish, fabulous-ish. There's a lot of ish going on today. But if you guys can believe it, we are halfway through the year. And it's at this time that I really take some time to step back and reassess how I'm trending towards my goals. The thing I don't want to do is end up in December. I set 12-month goals and I don't want to say, oh, I didn't hit this goal, but had I noticed it sooner, there could have been things I could have tried to do differently. Now, whenever I think about halfway points, I'm not going to lie, I always think of Barstow, California. Now, if you have never heard of Barstow, don't worry, a lot of people haven't. In fact, I would venture to say the people who are really only familiar with Barstow, California are people who live in California and find themselves traveling to Las Vegas, Nevada. Here's why. To get from California to Nevada, you have to go through a very large desert. And when I say desert, there is nothing out there. And then randomly, out of nowhere, pops this tiny little town called Barstow. Now, normally this town is really, especially when I was growing up, it was just about gas stations and a few small restaurants. And then there was this magical beacon of a place. And it was an old train that had been converted into, wait for it, McDonald's. McDonald's was part and inside of a train. So you would order your food and then you would take your food and you would sit in like a caboose. And listen, I know it sounds cheesy, but when you're a kid, so my grandmother lived in Las Vegas. And we would try to visit my grandmother every other month, and we would try to have her come to us as often as possible. And so my dad would pack all 5 of his kids and my mom, and we'd get in the car, and it'd be like 5 o'clock in the morning. It'd be dark outside, and we would, be taken from our PJs one by one. Now, here's the thing. My dad would load all of the kids, youngest to oldest. Now, I am the oldest of 5, and so I'd always be the last kid to be loaded in. We lived in a tiny little house, so all the kids were sleeping in 1 or 2 bedrooms at a time. So I'd hear my dad take each kid out to the car one by one, and I would be awake, but I would be like, I want my dad to carry me to the car, because there's nothing better than being in your PJs. Then my dad would wrap us in a blanket like a burrito and then carry us out kind of like a mummy out to the car. And he would lay car seats down. Like my dad, we drove like this thing called the Chinook. It was kind of like listen, just Google the word Chinook. They don't make these cars anymore, probably because they're massive, they're massive. These things should not be on the road. Okay. They just pose many threats, but it's like a tiny little camper on top of a tiny little truck, but they would have this tiny little kitchenette. Anyway, you would be able to get the Chinook and turn this seat, this long seat that was on the side of a table, and you could pull it out and put it and make it as a bed. So my dad would pile all us kids without seatbelts. Never mind the fact that we were riding in the back of the car or in the back of the Chinook without seatbelts. And then we'd all sleep. So it'd be 5:30 in the morning. And then we'd arrive at Barstow around 7:30. And so there we were. My parents would let us, oh my God, they would let us go into McDonald's with our PJs, and we would order breakfast, take our egg McMuffins to the caboose and eat them with golden hash browns. Y'all, I cannot, it's been decades since I've eaten at a McDonald's, but I will say, those memories, I could just taste them on the tip of my tongue. So when we talk about halfway points, I can't talk about halfway points without thinking about Barstow, without thinking of cabooses. Who needs Saint-Tropez? Who needs Dubai when you have golden tater tots from McDonald's? I'm just saying. So here's the thing. As you are assessing your life from Los Angeles to Vegas and you stop in Barstow, as you are assessing your business at a halfway point through the year, I want us to have conversations about things that we could do differently and or better. So halfway points indicate to me fresh opportunities. There was a time when halfway points would make me feel like I wasn't doing enough. And now a halfway point invites me to say, how might we make up time? make up space, make up our efforts. I don't believe that everything has to go to plan in order for it to come to fruition. Halfway points empower us to think that way. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make most of the time that we have left. And what I want to do in this shorty episode is highlight 2 episodes that are really going to give us a swift kick in the pants to get us to where we want to go. So this is probably, it will go down as one of probably the most popular episodes that we launched this year. It's called Change Your Life in 1 Year with Sahil Bloom. Now, I was in Miami and Sahil lives in New York. And I was like, hey, Sahil, I'm on the East Coast. Now, mind you, Miami to New York, it's about like a 5-hour flight, like 4.5, 5-hour flight. And I'm like, I'm going to be on the East Coast, which is still nowhere near him. And he's just like, yeah, I'll catch a flight. Let's pod together in Miami. So we had this great conversation, and the feedback that we got from it was really hinging upon one question I had asked him. And I had said, what do we do when we want to become the captains of our own ship? What do we do when we want to take control of our destiny? And here's his response.
The quote that you live by, I'd rather be a captain. I'd rather go down being the captain of my own ship than the deckhand on somebody else's. Can I read something that you had said on an Instagram reel? Okay. You said your entire life can change in 1 year, not 5, not 10. And so as we start this, there are a lot of people, I would venture to say 99.9% of the people who are watching and listening right now, they desperately want to be the captain of their own ship, but they have a hard time looking at a timeline and not being beholden or believing that if it's not executed in their timeline, that they will have not succeeded, they will be perceived a failure. So let's just go back when you said that tiny little ripple. 1 year, when you talk about changing your life in 1 year, like how can we talk about specific strategies? We are all podcast, like these podcast listeners, listen, I'll live and die by these folks. They take action. Mm-hmm. So somebody wants to look at 1 year to say, I want to be a captain. What do I do?
30 minutes today on something that you're interested in. I'm a huge believer that like one of the biggest drivers of inaction and of procrastination and of paralysis is intimidation. You look at it and you say like, oh my God, I'm sitting in my dead-end job. I'm sitting in this dead-end relationship, or my health is suffering and I'm overweight. And I cannot possibly envision the path to getting from here to being that fit person that I admire on Instagram, to being that wealthy entrepreneur that I admire on Instagram, to being in that loving relationship that I admire wherever I've seen it in the world. And the reality is like, you don't go from point A to point B overnight. It's the tiny little steps that happen along the way. It's those tiny little actions that you take. And so that bias has to come from doing the one little thing today. And I always say this, that like, you are always just one positive decision away from being in a slightly better place than you are today. And again, it's one small decision. Like you don't need to worry about the 100,000 decisions that are going to happen over the next year. You just need to worry about this one.
So my question for you today is, what tiny thing can you do that is going to push you towards your goals? I wanted you first to hear from Sahil. And the second thing I want to share is from a podcast with guest Dan Martell that was titled How to Push Past Your Revenue Ceiling. This opened a lot of people to think in new ways about how you are earning money and then also hitting those financial goals that you have. Now, in this clip, Dan is talking about the best way to build belief in yourself and then reach your goals. Let's listen in. When I was in SaaS Academy, he would always be like posting like behind the scenes stories or trainings. And so he would be on coaching sessions, like he himself has a coach or he himself has like mastermind meetings, and he's on his triathlon bike in the meeting itself. And so there's like a lot of discipline that was there. But I definitely saw being so close to you as a coach and then paying to be part of your coaching program is the amount of discipline that it takes. And so what I hear is discipline on sitting on the proverbial competitor's, driveway, or you putting yourself in situations of where somebody might need your services, not know that they need your services, but before they do, it's like that requires discipline. And there were times in your career, like at what point did you actually realize that a competitive advantage is your discipline? And for people who are not, they just don't really identify with being disciplined in an Ironman capacity, in a business capacity, but they want that. What are some preliminary things that you could say, I flex this muscle in a business perspective that has then helped me in a personal perspective, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that everything that you desire, if you think of like, creating a vision board, writing out your goals, having a list of projects, like anything you want to accomplish, it sits on the other side of your discipline, right? Because people think it's motivation, but your habits will pick up where your motivation falls apart. And it's not about being motivated. I don't wake up every day and I'm motivated to do what I do. I wake up and I made a commitment to myself. So I execute. And starts to build a capacity to do that over time. So my favorite place to recommend people start looking at this is just your daily decisions, right? Everything from what you're going to eat, are you going to work out? The gateway drug to success for me has always been the physical component of it, because it's one of those things that teaches you so many great lessons, right? Our self-confidence is tied to keeping the commitments we make to ourselves in private. So when I make a commitment to myself, I'm going to go to the gym 4 times this week, or I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m., or I'm going to eat clean for the week and have one cheat meal on Saturday or Sunday, or whatever it is, that starts to build a narrative to yourself that you are somebody that says, that does what they say they're going to do. So that confidence starts to build. Going to the gym allows you to start building the muscle of delayed gratification, which is required to be successful. Anybody that starts a business and expects to be a millionaire in 6 months, unfortunately, are going to be dramatically disappointed. And for many of them, they're going to give up because of it. And going to the gym and understanding, I remember my buddy Marty once, he said this to me. He goes, "Hey man, I want to go to the gym with you, but I don't want to get too big." And I said, "Well, Marty, you can stop at any point that you think your arms are busting out of your shirt." And he laughed. And I go, it's such a silly thing. But the idea of saying I'm going to do something and show up until I get a result, that is such a beautiful skill to learn, typically through some level of fitness and exercise. And all of that translates back into our business, because we don't get in our life what we want. We get what we think we deserve.
I just want to pause and repeat a very powerful line. Dan said the idea of saying, I'm going to do something and show up until I get the result is a beautiful skill to learn. I want to point out that what he said is what I believe. It is a skill. We can learn this skill, and I hope you do, especially at the halfway point through the year. I hope that this gave you the boost that you needed and or you wanted today. I hope that wherever you are listening, you understand, number one, it is not too late to hit your goals. Number two, if you somehow fell off the wagon or things went awry or there were things outside of your control that you just could not control, we've all been there. Don't worry, you're not alone. This episode is for you. It is not happenstance that this episode came across your ears or your eyes. I believe this episode had your name on it since the day you were born. Do I sound a little woo-woo? Perhaps. And you want to know what? I don't care. I believe that things that you consume or things that come into your path are destined from the beginning. There is going to be things that rise up that will pause you. But being paused and being stopped are two different things. So I'm not going to let that get in our way, at least not today. As we are sitting here and assessing what we could possibly do in the second half of our year, I want us to understand that we are the captains of our ship. The minute we decide I am going to get there, and the path might not look exactly as I hope, and the path might be a lot more treacherous, and it might be twice as hard and take twice as long. But as long as you have that vision and you say, I am getting there, then we release ourselves from timelines and we release ourselves from expectations, understanding that the process of getting to where we want to go is better than the location itself. I say this so many times, but I'm mostly, honestly, saying it to myself. It is the process. May I find joy and deep revelation in becoming a stronger business owner, understanding that everything that is happening for me. It is not happening to me. Thank you for watching and listening to the Jasmine Star Show. It is an honor and it is a privilege.